I'll drop out.
I'm not even studying for it because I already know the group. Yeah, that's what I mean. Which one? What he is studying. I don't know why.
Remind me in about 10 minutes. I'm gonna go.
Mr. Partridge, do you have another review packet
There might be a couple up there.
up there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Leader guy.
Oh. Is he predicting the eclipse?
Yeah.
Predicted solar.
Let's get the farmer's almanac. And nobody else did.
The other farmers did.
No, the other
Not the
Indians.
But you eliminated.
Yeah,
But he had it.
that's why he was,
Farmer?
no, somebody gave it to me.
I feel like it's like-
Oh, they give it. Oh, I never.
I literally just turned this and then opened it so you can use it.
I don't know, because I only slept one of those days.
All right. Hey,
My tummy's still.
And then today I learned you can't as much
probably.
like try it until we know, so.
Well, let me tell you a couple things real fast before I get started. These are all they got 2 sets of essay type questions last year. My guess is they'll do the same thing again. You know, they'll probably do, you know, they'll just randomly give it to people in the class. I really don't know for sure, but this is one of last year's. And it's, oh, did anyone do your practice test?
Are we supposed to do the writing?
Yeah, you have 2. You have 2 due.
Yeah.
You have to do 2, yeah.
Are we supposed to do the short
No,
answers
just
on this?
but just multiple choice. How did you do?
The test?
I missed those.
That's
What
good.
is
That's really good.
What is the test?
That's when you guys are taking
That's
the
the
test.
Oh.
test.
Oh, so it's this week.
Yeah.
Chris, when did we start studying?
Yes. The packets?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the practice test Monday.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
And so that was my Thursday and Friday assignment. And and like I said, if you got over 60% correct, you've done fine. And if you get over 70, you've done very well. You get 80, you're nailing it. So don't think 90, 80, 70, 60. And there's always going to be a few questions that are like, really? You know, the wording, they purposely put a bunch of things that sound right, and they might be correct for different answers. You just have to narrow it down and pick the best ones. And as long as you have a good reason to do it, you've done well on the test. You know, that's good practice. Just seeing how they do it. All the tests I'm going to give you today, tomorrow, I'll give you another one. They're all one for the AP. So this is last year's essays. Short answer questions, DBQ, essay question, they're all right here. And I put a link on Teams to this. I put a link on my webpage. There's a lot of links to this. You can look at the ones. I think they have all from 2015 to 2023 on there. They do not issue the multiple choice. You have no idea what the multiple choice. We'll never see those again. So everything we have here is practice. And so for the short answer question, the first one is going to be two quotes, and you have to find something that relates the two, and then basically find one. You pick a topic related to the first quote. You pick a topic related to the second quote. That's what the short answer question is. And so just pick something that relates them both. This one is actually two pretty good quotes. This one really good question. So it talks about how working class people felt benefited by the New Deal. And here it talks about how the New Deal did not necessarily end Jim Crow laws. It did not change that. It did not do any laws. Remember, the plan for the third New Deal was to have some kind of civil rights, and that didn't happen. And so that's a pretty good one. Just pick something about a New Deal program that affected both working people and people in the South. You have 800 WPA did not discriminate, the AAA, any number of things. And then one event or development 32 to 35 that is not mentioned, but relates to working class Chicagoans, like the Wagner Act and labor unions. Here, about people in the South, especially for African Americans in the South, one development, you could have the WPA not discriminating, or the Agricultural Adjustment Act. You pick the topic. That's a good one. The next one is just another quote. This one's about the Progressive Era, and you pick the topics for three of them. And then the last one, you'll get a choice. Agriculture influenced migration from 1607 to 1776. That's like good. That's like tobacco plantations, things like that. And here, one way agriculture interests influenced societal debates in the United States from 1865 to 1900. That's talking about the populist era. Remember the populist and agrarian problems. That's 1880s, 1890s, and those are terms on the review book. So those are pretty good questions. And then I'll show you the rest of what they have. The DBQ, they'll give you a little bit of background material. I don't know what they're going to put this year because they've changed some. That's why the one I gave you, the last one we gave on the atomic bomb, I had the old ones. I don't know what it's going to be. And then the question, it's right here on top. Evaluate the extent to which commercial development changed the United States society from 1800 to 1855. Now, this is one of those things like, really, do you have to word it this way? But what they're talking about is the Industrial Revolution. That's what it is. It's all Industrial Revolution. All the documents relate to it and the creation of capitalism. And this was one that the class really liked getting. Once they got over commercial development, oh wait, Industrial Revolution, I remember that. And then they went fine. It was no problem. The other one was not as good. You get what you get, I'm sorry. And then the other questions, so they have good documents. And the other questions were, they have three of them. And transatlantic trade, 1607 to 1776. That's triangular trade, the Navigation Acts, mercantilism, the slave trade. They said foreign policy contributed to territorial growth from 1840 to 1898. You know what they're talking about? Two wars, the Mexican War and the Spanish-American War. And here, the extent which growing concerns about national security, about American foreign policy from 1945 to 1991, Cold War. Yeah, Cold War, Vietnam. Yeah, that's what it's talking about. Korea. Yeah, those would be pretty good questions. So, I wish I could tell you get those same questions again. Who knows what you'll get? That's the fun, isn't it? But make sure when you read it, make sure you address what it says in the question. Make sure you address your thesis, get a good brainstorm list. And remember when you're writing an essay, that opening paragraph, you need context, background material, things that you're not going to have in your body. Paragraphs. Have that and address your question, and that is 2 points right there. And then for the DBQ, you just explain how three of the documents, just describe it. That's a point. You take the three and add one more and show how it relates to your thesis. That's 1 point. And right there, you basically have your passing position. For these documents, for the regular essay, 2, describe how it relates. Describe 2 examples of evidence. And then you get another point for explaining how they relate to your thesis. So if you give 2 examples of evidence per body paragraph in an essay, you nail it. Topic sentence, explained. 2 pieces of evidence while you explain how it relates to your thesis, tie it all together in your last sentence. Just like we do in every short ID, you just have to make sure you have a topic sentence and 2 examples of evidence. All right, so I just wanted to show you this. I have them all in there. I have the links to it. I think yeah, this is the one everyone liked. The other one just weren't as good. So let's hope we all get the ones we like. And the big thing is, if you're not sure, brainstorm and get as close as you can. And like for the DBQ, you have one choice. And if you get something you're not 100% sure, answer close. Give them a reason to give you a grade. Get close. Give facts. Explain the documents. Give context for the error. If you can't 100% get it, just give them a reason. Explain 3 documents. Just describe what's in it. Give context. Just give as much background as you can give. Give any kind of outside information. If you're not 100% sure, give them a reason to give you points. You don't need all 7. You need 4 or 5. Context, thesis, describe 3 documents you're already doing. And all of you can do that quite well. I'm convinced. In fact, I know you will. You're going to do great on that part. And you know why you get one that's worded funny? Catch your breath and go back and figure out what the error is when it's talking about. Because you know what they're going to be worded funny. That's what they do. Actually, they're not evil. What they are is they're a bunch of people who write the questions. They keep them in a basement in locked rooms, and they never let them communicate with other people. They just write questions. So that's where you get those. All right. So are there any questions on this one? I will go over any one.
Well, I just had a question.
Yeah.
So, it was on 20 minutes.
Yeah, it only goes to page 55.
Yeah. Question 52.
Yeah.
Which of the following would most likely support the users arrest in next week? And then it was just like, I don't know, just the options. Like,
Oh, I
I
know.
didn't realize how.
So I will not accept the excuse of the federal government that's going to be so big and powerful. You know, that one. So that's a Reagan speech, and he's talking about this is a conservative backlash against what is going on. Basically, the government programs of the Great Society, which we're going to talk about tomorrow and Tuesday in class. And so 52, yeah, that's a hard question. Which of the following most likely support the views of the rest of this answer? White males in the Sun Belt. That's my law. We go turn on this.
Hey, I did this next. You see my kids, my heart will report this.
Just go to the party.
This was $50 for it. It's like 10.
Overseas from
Better there.
Arizona to
Never mind.
Y'all should probably think about it better.
No, I'm not trying to make these really big and complicated. I use the one I'm saying. That is fire for
Wow.
We're not even getting there.
I'm not sure if we have to talk about this places. It's mostly like.
Mr. Phillips is blasting AC/DC upstairs where he cleans the lab.
That's what that was.
And he asked me, do you mind if I turn it up? And I said, crank it. Even though I took it to Australia. And so let me get back to this. I'm sorry, I just had to go kick the rock out. Yeah, I don't like this question. Yeah, that's a really hard one, and I'm not sure exactly what they're looking for. And so, yeah, women in the Northeast, African American in the Midwest, probably not. He's trying to appeal probably the white males. So that would be the answer to number 8. The conservative backlash really appealed to them.
Well, so this is just stuff we have to.
Yeah.
And then like pigs. Should we start talking 1980s present day?
Yeah, that's when you gotta do on 11, that's page 11 of the review book you have to do on your. And what I said is, I mean, we'll see if I'll still do it, but I was thinking about doing on Wednesday or Tuesday at lunch, I will go over everything from page 11. I will go over as much as I can get. Yeah, the other thing, we got so much to cover and we just ran up on a time crunch. All right, I'll be glad then to answer any other questions. I agree on that one. You're gonna get questions like that. Here's the big thing. Try to narrow it down the best you can and then pick, make an educated guess. Give me one sec. Okay, which question?
Can you go over Plymouth?
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 On page 1? Sure. Plymouth on page 1. I'll start going over everything I got. I'll go over everything you have. Let's see, page 1, Plymouth colony. So that was a colony for the separatists. Sometimes we call the Pilgrims. And they wanted to create a colony for their Calvinist or sect. They believed in predestination. But when they arrived, half of them didn't want to stay. They wanted to go to Virginia. They weren't separatists. And so they wrote the Mayflower Compact, which was an article of self-government, where they basically said that regardless of what religion, meaning regardless if you're a separatist or not, we will all share equally in the colony. And that was to make sure that those people didn't go right down to Virginia. And this is going to be set up as an example of self-government in the United States, but also indirectly this concept of freedom of religion. I should also add, the only reason we know about it is because they wrote all the textbooks in New England after the Civil War. So they didn't want to talk about Jamestown and a bunch of Confederates. So they talk about Plymouth colony. Doesn't mean it's not important, but that's why it's there. And no, they did not dress in big belt buckles. They did not call themselves pilgrims, and they got married in the nude. Yes?
On page 9, would you talk about the 3 court cases under the Warren Court?
No, you want me to talk about it? I'll be glad to. Let's go right to page 90. Did I say 90?
9.
Let's go to page 9. The 3 court cases of the Warren Court. So the Warren Court was the very liberal court. Earl Warren, the Warren Court from 1954 to 1969. And no court in history attempted to bring to give more equal civil rights than any court before or since, especially since. And there's a lot of court cases, but the 3 we have to get: Engel versus Vital. And the Engel decision said, it said that school prayer cannot be required in public school. You cannot require prayer in school. It was pretty common to do prayer. Everybody would have to do usually a Protestant Christian prayer. Now you can pray in school. You just can't force other people to do it. I mean, right now you could be praying that you're already done with the AP exam and you have this packet filled. You're more than welcome to do that. But it's implying that they can't force somebody. The other one, Griswold versus Connecticut, is one of the most important decisions in history. That one would give, basically saying that everybody has a implied right to privacy in the Constitution under the 14th and 4th Amendment. And the big issue here was that since we have an implied right to privacy, we as all citizens of the United States, it said that women can have access to birth control. That it was the decision was about birth control, but it said that we have the right to privacy. And this is a big, really important decision because the current Supreme Court might be throwing this one out. So we don't longer have a right to privacy and indirectly birth control. Next one.
What were the amendments?
Huh?
What amendments were those?
14th and 4th. Everything's under the 14th. And the Miranda decision. And the Miranda is that everybody who is arrested deserves due process of the law, and that must be, and that has to be told to anybody being arrested. The Miranda ruling said that. And that's, so that's why whenever you see, someone get arrested and say you have the right to remain silent, that's the Miranda rule. That's the Miranda rule. And Yeah, they don't have to say that, but it became they could say it in different ways, but it just became convenient to have everyone saying the same thing. So that's where that comes from. Because before people could be arrested and they wouldn't necessarily know their rights. Okay, another one. Anyone, any question you have, I'll be glad to answer. Anywhere on this. If you want to do page 11, if you want to do page 10, if you want to do page 90, yes.
The Federalist Party and the Republican Party on page 2.
Page 2, the Federalists and Republicans. So let me see if I can find it. Near the bottom. Those are the first two political parties. And the Federalist Party, they kind of resolved around the ideas of Alexander Hamilton with the idea of a strong central government that will be organized to promote industry or mercantile means. This is pre-industrial revolution, but it's like planning this. And so the Federalist Party would be the ones who wanted a loose interpretation of the Constitution to allow for more government aid of business, like the Bank of the United States, which I have the bank on here, don't I? Yeah, I have the bank and the elastic clause, the high tariff, and the assumption bill. You see those three below? They supported all of those. And they supported Britain. The Republican Party would revolve around the ideas of Jefferson and, kind of ironically, Madison. And you'll see them sometimes called the Democratic Republican Party, even though they always called themselves Republicans. So if you see Democratic Republican, if you're referring to these, differentiate them from the future Republicans. And they opposed those three laws because they feared a strong central government would promote the merchant class over the agrarian class. Merchant over agrarian. So they opposed the bank and they were fearful of the development of, or the accumulation of wealth by creditors. Oh, and they were pro-France in the wars. Any others? Yes. Bacon's Rebellion, one of the most important events in history. Page 1. So Bacon's Rebellion, 1676, that is when almost all the lower class in Virginia colony, so we're talking slaves, former slaves, indentured servants, former indentured servants, all revolted against the ruling class, the House of Burgesses. Remember the House of Burgesses, the first assembly? And they were demanding more rights in government because they were given the worst land. Remember head rights? Does that sound familiar? The 50 acres of land. They demanded better land and protection. And they almost won, but they would be put down. The merchant class was able to, the Burgesses were able to buy up a militia and put them down. But that led directly to the slave codes. And the slave codes would drive a wedge between all the kind of lower class, where the slave codes would set or give more rights to former indentured servants because they had a contract and less rights to slaves and former slaves. Especially the most important, remember, the fornication laws that set up permanent slavery. And out of the slave code from Bacon's Rebellion would come racism as we know it, because every colony was involved in this. And so you have the poor fighting each other while the ruling elite staying on top. So you see this thing in Little Rock Central High. Yeah.
Just out on that page, Anne Hutchinson, who's that?
Anne Hutchinson, like about three-quarters of the way down on the left, looking at it. She would be kicked out of Massachusetts colony because she was demanding more, or basically the more idea of like a religious freedom and individual freedom that was being denied by the Massachusetts colony, who was trying to dictate to everybody exactly about the way their religion should go. And so she would become a real symbol for a combination of three different things. She'll be known for fighting for religious freedom, for individual rights, and a woman doing this in Massachusetts in the 1630s was remarkable. But she's going to be kicked out of the colonies, and she would actually die on Long Island. But she would be kicked out. This is one of those that will be remembered kind of like in the 1950s and 60s. Oh, Anne Hutchinson, what about her? Not just man. Yeah. On what page? Page 5, Plessy versus Ferguson. Okay, so that's 1896. Where are we at? I can't find it. Yeah, Plessy versus Ferguson. And this court case would allow for Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws by saying separate but equal. Page 5.
Was that the case that said that slaves were always property so they could go to the territories?
No, that's Dred Scott. This was after the Civil War, but this allowed for Jim Crow laws. So this allowed for Jim Crow laws, and it would be these separate but equal laws that would begin to be chipped away in the 1950s with, like, for example, Brown versus Topeka Board of Education, and then et cetera from that. But this would be huge because it would allow for Jim Crow. Basically saying, yeah, the 14th Amendment's important, but yeah, close enough. We're close. Yeah. Yeah, is that on page? Yeah, page 5 near the top, 13th Amendment. So that would end slavery, and that would be passed in Congress right after the end of the war. And all states from the former Confederacy had to ratify. Oh, I should add, all the states of the former Confederacy had to ratify all 3 of these. The 14th Amendment's the most important part of the US Constitution. And what it basically does is it guarantees civil rights and due process of the law to citizens of every state. Meaning the Bill of Rights goes to the states. Before, that was not clear. So this guarantees equal rights. It also set up, if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen. So they can't say, slaves, if they weren't born a citizen, they can't be a citizen. Well, if you're born, you're a citizen. And so the 14th Amendment, so virtually every ruling from then on of the Warren Court, when they go back and try to give people more rights, it will always go back to the 14th Amendment, because that's the one that the states can't deprive them. 15, it says that all men, almost forgot one thing about the 14th Amendment, kind of a big deal. It's unclear who a citizen is, and so men are only guaranteed rights under the 14th Amendment, which is still the way it is today. 15th Amendment, that said that the right to vote cannot be taken away from men. But it's a gray area then, because it says the right to vote. So there's no right to vote, and that would allow for laws like the Grandfather's Clause and other ways to restrict voting in the South. Good. Any others?
Did the 14th Amendment also guarantee men the right to vote?
No, that's only the 15th. The 14th Amendment implied it, but they decided we're going to have to do a 15th to make it clear. But they still didn't make it 100% clear. Yeah, we don't have a right to vote. Yeah. Top of page 2, the Coercive Acts. So that came right after the Tea Party. And in the colonies, they called them the Intolerable Acts. But these are a direct result of the Tea Act and the Tea Party, anger that Britain had. And they did 4 things: close Boston Harbor, shut down the Massachusetts Colonial Assembly, so shut down their assembly, close the harbor. They would start to quarter troops in the colonies. That goes back to the Townshend Acts. So they quarter troops. And then the last one, are we caught up, everybody? I know I'm going to go too fast. And then the last one would be British subjects will be tried in England if they're convicted of a crime, which just infuriated the colonists. And the big thing about the Coercive Acts, the Tories in Britain thought this will punish them and bring them back. But now the Patriots could say, we told you they were going to do this. We told you they're going to get rid of self-government. They're going to get rid of our way to make a living. They're going to control us by keeping troops in our home, and they'll commit any crimes they want, and they'll get off scot-free. So the Patriots would use this as a told you so, and that would lead directly to the Continental Congress and the beginnings of the events of the Revolution. Yeah.
Could you do the Puritans in Massachusetts Bay?
Puritans, Massachusetts Bay. So the Puritans were closely Calvinists who wanted to reform the Church of England, but they were basically Calvinists. But they felt they had to, same deal as the separatists, they thought they had to create a colony for religious freedom for themselves. And so they created what's called the Commonwealth, a colony for Puritans. And in the 1630s was a massive migration. Literally, they called it the Great Migration. We have two great migrations. All these Puritans came and created Boston and Massachusetts colony as a colony for Puritans, for Calvinists. Yeah. Square deal, where's it up? Square deal. Yeah, it's Teddy Roosevelt. Oh, Teddy Roosevelt and Square deal. So that's Teddy Roosevelt's progressive 1904 platform, where he laid out his progressive ideas with such things as a progressive income tax. And so obviously needs an income tax. It needs that meant for income tax. But also he wanted regulation of business, especially antitrust. That's why he's going to be called the Trust Buster. Even though he didn't really break up that many trusts, he's going to have this nickname to this day. And things like conservation and direct election of senators. Most of the Square deal didn't pass, but it would lay out an alternative, the beginnings of an alternative to laissez-faire economics. So the beginnings of liberal economics, you can see the Square deal and the populace. It's very much, I want to add one thing about the Square deal. It's very much like the populace. It's a very much continuation, and you see the next continuation with like Woodrow Wilson, but the biggie would be the New Deal. Even though the New Deal is a little more populist, but it's still like a continuation of the same ideas. And then like John Kennedy's New Frontier and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. You know, yeah.
New Spain
On page what?
one.
Which one again?
New Spain.
New Spain. So, yeah, fine. And yeah, it's right under the period 2. And that is, we probably, I can't imagine there'll be much on New Spain. But the big thing about New Spain was this would be the colony that would basically stretch from what is now the southwestern United States all the way through Argentina. This massive Spanish colony. And in it, they would have a pretty repressive system where they would try to force the conversion of American Indians to Catholicism. They would basically enslave them on what's called the encomienda, which is a little bit above there. You see right above those, that would be the big plantations where the American Indians who survived the diseases would be enslaved. And it would be dominated by a small elite of people from Spain. And so that would be a competitor to the British colonies. I should add, they also got a lot of gold and silver. Period 1. The whole thing? Just ask individual ones and I'll do it.
Southwest.
The Southwest tribes, and the Southwest tribes were almost all agricultural, relatively small communities who had to learn out, they did agriculture and some hunting and gathering, but you'll see a lot of irrigation and really complex societies, including some cities as large as 15,000 people, known as pueblos, where they would take advantage of, or more like adapt to the situation and build vast cities of mud. That would also double as walled cities. But they had vast trading networks. But by definition, these tribes were pretty small because they had to keep the population down because of little rain. Next one.
The philosophy of the Declaration.
The philosophy of the Declaration of Independence. And yeah, I'll have to know when we come back to it. Philosophy of the Declaration of Independence. Is that on middle page 3? Middle page 2. So it kind of resolves, it's Jefferson's view of the Enlightenment. So it's very much of this Enlightenment where we can come up with natural laws for governing people, natural laws. So it's very much his Enlightenment idea and really pushing this idea of individual liberties. And that's where you get the term liberal from, individual liberties. And the main elements of the philosophy are threefold, and they all fit into this. Equality, all men are created equal. Idea of we're all equal under the law. Next one, unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is life is independence, liberty, freedom of conscience, pursuit of happiness, go as far as your abilities take you. Independence, freedom of conscience, as far as your abilities take you. And lastly, the social contract, which says governments are created to protect rights, and if they infringe, the people have to change them, thus justifying the Declaration of Independence, justifying independence. Yeah, I think it's been a long time since I asked a good question on the Declaration of Independence. It seems like that would be it. I have no idea, but it seems like that would be a good choice for a question. Nat Turner's Rebellion. Someone 4 or 5 or 4? Oh, there it is. Yep. Now about a quarter of the way down on the right. 1831, Nat Turner's Rebellion was a very large slave rebellion in Virginia, led by Nat Turner, and it would be over 50 white Virginians would be killed. Over 250 would be executed. Slaves would be, or enslaved people would be executed afterwards. But this terrified the South, absolutely freaked them out, and it led to even more restrictive slave codes, literally called Nat Turner laws, all over the South. And they believed what was causing this was outside agitators, because the first abolitionist newspaper was just being printed in 1831. So that's why they would have laws like not allowing slaves to read, or to restrict them meeting in groups because they might lead to slave rebellion. Remember, their biggest fear was slave rebellion. Nat Turner would freak them out. Now don't forget, the potential slave rebellion that would really freak them out and directly lead to civil wars, John Brown. Yeah. Tippecanoe, I will. I'll be glad to. Page 3. Yeah, page 3. Okay, so Tecumseh would attempt to lead a confederation of the various tribes of the Old Northwest, like Indiana, Illinois, but the Old Northwest, as a chance to unify against the expanding United States. And he really terrified the United States. If he could actually organize a confederacy that might stick together, the other ones all fell apart. He was a real threat. But while he was in the South trying to recruit the powerful Southern tribes like the Choctaw and the Creek, his brother's encampment on Tippecanoe Creek would be attacked by the U.S. Army Reserves under William Henry Harrison. Remember Tippecanoe and Tyler too? And Harrison, in a really a very close battle, Tippecanoe would be a massive victory for the United States. One of the most decisive and important victories in American history, because it ended that chance of Confederacy, the last chance that American Indians could ever be strong enough to unify. And after this, there's absolutely no way that anyone can stop the United States. Should add one more thing. It's after Tippecanoe, combined with the War of 1812, that citizens of the United States started calling themselves Americans. Unlike American Indians, that used to be called the Americans. This is our continent. Remember nationalism, we have big test of nationalism. It's ours. They blamed the British, and that would help lead to the War of 1812. Yeah. Whigs? That's, oh yeah, it's, so we have 2 more parties, the Democrats and the Whigs. So the Whigs were the opposition party to, everyone find it? The opposition party to Andrew Jackson. It was the I Hate Andrew Jackson party. And it was made up of the big plantation owners who wanted to maintain control of the South, and the growing mercantile commercial interests of the North, especially the new capitals. And they're the ones who believed in the concept of free labor and wanted more government aid to the Northern Whigs. Wanted more government aid to business, things like Henry Clay's American system. That's who the Whigs wanted. So you have this weird combination of Southern plantation owners and commercial interests. And their big thing is they hated democracy, despised it. And then I think I know I have free labor on here, don't I? On the next page? Please say I do. Yeah, I do. Good. So it was the Whigs who believed in free labor. The Democrats more thought about free wage labor. Yeah.
The bottom of page 3, I don't know if these are related, but the bank war and the nullification tariff.
They're all related as things Andrew Jackson did. That's why I put them together. Do you want me to tell you the bank war?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, why not, huh?
Yes, please.
And so the bank war, Andrew Jackson fit with that democratic idea of fearing concentrated wealth. And the National Bank was the first corporation. And what his basic party was, the Democrats, they feared this idea that the owners of the bank could control the money supply for their own personal interests. And so he was opposed to the bank because he thought, with some justification, that they would use their power to control the money supply. You remember, if you create deflation, you can you just increase your wealth if you just have wealth, things like that. And so he vetoed the bill to recharter the bank in 1832. Henry Clay's bill. He did it 4 years earlier than he had to do it. Clay wanted to make it an election issue. Jackson vetoed this. One of the first times the president would use a veto as a political mean for a political measure, and would begin to put federal deposits, federal revenues, like tax revenues, in state banks, with the idea of breaking the bank. And so to Andrew Jackson, this was fighting against the wealthy, entrenched elite. And he would be proven correct, because Nicholas Biddle, the head of the bank, would begin to pull money out of the circulation to punish Jackson. And that would help lead to the Panic of 1837. The problem is, we didn't have a national bank, and that would lead to all kinds of prices down the road too. But that's why Jackson did it. Any others? Yeah.
Can you go over the Marshall cases?
I will. Marshall Court. So Marshall Court in the middle of page 3. So John Marshall was appointed by John Adams, the Federalist, right before the Federalists left office, and Marshall would be Chief Justice for 35 years. So showing that, the power, the Federalist Party was long gone, and a Federalist Chief Justice was still there. And his court was known as a nationalist court. They called it nationalist in this context of making the federal government more powerful, the Marshall Court. And there are 4 decisions, and we just know the basics. Marbury versus Madison, that's the one that the Supreme Court gave themselves the power of judicial review. And that's the most important court case. It's not in the Constitution, they just gave themselves the power. Not everyone agreed. Jefferson wanted to impeach Marshall because of this, but it didn't happen. McCulloch versus Maryland, that was basically said that implied powers, implied powers are constitutional. The bank was an implied power, and therefore the bank could happen. The next one is Gibbons versus Ogden, and that said that judicial review went to the states. And lastly, Dartmouth versus Woodward, and that one is the sanctity of contracts. That contracts are protected by the Constitution, and this is a big deal because this will help. Capitalism cannot function without contracts. So this would allow for contracts, but it also is a big boon for the wealthy, because contracts always benefit those with power. So creditors, big court.
What was Gibbons versus Ogden again?
Judicial review went to the states. Oh, wait a minute. I'm doing Yazoo. The Yazoo decision was judicial review went to the states. Yazoo versus Georgia. No, Gibbons versus Ogden is my fault. Thank you for reminding me. Sorry, going, and my mind got frozen. Gibbons versus Ogden is that one would say that the federal government can regulate interstate commerce. I'm sorry about that. I am sorry. I have the Yazoo court decision.
Is that on our test?
Hmm?
Is that in this document?
Yeah, no, it won't be. That's one of the most important court cases of the Marshall Court, and I chose the 4 biggest ones. And I just had it in my head. Getting old. I don't even know where I'm at right now. Yes. Which one? Jefferson's philosophy. Is that on the top of page? Yeah. The big deal about Jefferson's philosophy was his view of the common man. That the federal government should be there to protect the common man. Common man not as average, but common man as not of aristocratic birth, like Jefferson. And the other issues were that he saw this vision of the common man. To protect the common man, we need an agrarian society of independent farmers who would not be beholden to anybody else. And he feared a large federal debt because he thought that would be used by the very wealthy, like Hamilton, to encourage pro-business policies. And he was obsessed with the American West. That's why he would, because the idea was you open up land for small farmers. And lastly, he was pragmatic. Even though he said all these things, he was pragmatic. And so, for example, he would say, we need to strictly interpret the Constitution, and they would stretch the Constitution to buy Louisiana.
Is that before Manifest, like the Manifest Destiny, or that?
Manifest Destiny is going to come 1830s, 1840, but that's like setting the stage for Manifest Destiny. It just, the term wasn't quite there. Yeah.
What is agrarian?
Farming. Agriculture, agrarian. Yeah. Yeomen, independent farmers. And that became the American dream until it all be blown up in the 20s and 30s. Then it became car, TV, and 2.2 children and a dog. Yes?
We do Joe 1 on page 9.
We can and will.
Thank you.
Joe 1, that's the first atomic bomb in 1949. And that's on page 8? 9?
9.
Joe 1, the first atomic bomb, and that's part of what freaked out the United States. That would lead directly to McCarthyism.
First Soviet atomic?
What did I say?
You just said first atomic.
First Soviet atomic bomb, yeah, 1949. It was the same year that the People's Republic of China won, and that's who lost China, and that would directly lead to the massive freakout that led to the Second Red Scare, McCarthyism, HUAC, yeah, just all went nuts. Another one. Like I said, I will go through a lot. Yeah. Page 6, laissez-faire economics. And this is the precursor to conservative economics. I can't find it. Yeah, right near right at the top. So you can see the elements of conservative economics, but what it was hands off on competition. So allow companies to compete any way they want, but they wanted massive government aid for business. And so it wasn't fully laissez-faire. So they wanted like open immigration to increase the market. They wanted a high protective tariff. They wanted the gold standard. They wanted to have the government break up labor unions, which
Basically wanted the government to, anti-government regulation is basically what it is, right? They want the government like subsidization without the government regulation.
yeah, they wanted no regulation on like antitrust, no regulation on like worker safety, no regulation on product safety. And then by the 1960s, the same idea would be no regulation on environment. And so laissez-faire would become, oh, and I should add, by definition, then this is not meant to help the very wealthy. Because if there's no regulation of competition, the big will win almost always. Almost always, because remember, economies of scale. Yeah.
Can you do Gilded Age politics?
Which politics?
Gilded Age.
Oh, Gilded Age politics. Where are we at? I can't find it. Yeah, I found it. So Gilded Age politics was really a marriage between government and business, where business interest really, especially after 1882, really controlled government policy. Business interest with their money was able to influence it. And so you're going to have what they call the Senate, the Millionaires Club. And almost everything from the Supreme Court to Congress will continually pass laws that will benefit big business. Like the really horribly worded Sherman Antitrust Act or increased tariffs. Yeah.
Is free silver on this packet?
I did not put free silver on there, but free silver would be part of the election of 1896.
Would you talk about that one?
Sure. Yeah, the election of 1896. Remember the populists thought they had an answer, the Populist Party, but the Democrats stole their thunder by nominating William Jennings Bryan, who his slogan was free silver, which really came to represent more money in circulation, came to represent inflation, and also the populist programs of antitrust. So free silver came to represent that. And the Republicans nominated William McKinley, the conservative laissez-faire governor of Ohio. And his then would be gold. And the gold standard represented stability and wealth and solid government. And so that's big. And even though Bryan had a lot of support, the big money, for the first time, money really poured in for McKinley, and Bryan would win. But this populist free silver idea, the populist reforms they wanted, would set the stage for the progressives and the New Deal. And I left you a lot of space to put all that in, right? Yeah, more than enough space. Hey, this is all, you've jotted down a few words. You figure out, really, you guys all have very effective shorthand, right? Yes.
Can you do the 2 amendments on the top of page 7?
Page 7, 2 amendments. We have the 16th and the 18th.
Are they the same sheet? I don't know.
The 16th Amendment was one of the most important progressive amendments and allowed for an income tax. And so the first income tax would be the Underwood tariff, but allowed for an income tax. Remember, one of the big goals was a progressive income tax. And so you can tie that all the way then to like FDR's Wealth Tax Act, which would lead directly to the Great Depression. The 18th Amendment, that was prohibition, where the temperance movement turned into this great experiment to remake society. And this was like one of the last big progressive reforms, prohibition. Yeah. How did you and I do it? We just had enough. In 1933, they ratified the Constitution to get the 21st Amendment got rid of it. So that's the only time that really happened, when they got rid of an amendment. Yeah. And they did a it was like, it went through state conventions, just boom, got it. Took like 2 days. But here's the thing about the 18th Amendment. The 18th Amendment, yes, drinking went down dramatically, but would lead to a massive increase in organized crime, and it would be enforced, prohibition would be enforced by the Volstead Act. Yes?
Can you do the Scopes monkey trial?
I would be glad. I would be glad. Scopes monkey trial, page 7. So the Scopes monkey trial would be a trial over the teaching of evolution in Dayton, Tennessee, but the teaching of evolution. And Scopes was a substitute teacher who would be tried for teaching evolution. It was kind of a setup. But the big issue is that this showed the growing levels of fundamentalism and this a conservative fundamentalism in the 1920s. Fearful of the future and all the dramatic changes that were going on. Because the 20s, you have the new consumer economy, and there's so many technological changes just blowing people away. And so it was like a fight against that, as symbolized by evolution. And even though Scopes will be found guilty, there's a belief by some that this would lead to the more teaching of science and evolution, but that actually did not happen. It showed that everyone would be afraid to teach science until 1957. And it's fine. Yeah.
The National Origins Act.
Yeah, and that's a really big one. So the National Origins Act would set up a quota system for immigration. So for the first time, there would be a strict limitations of all immigrants. There was a Chinese Exclusion Act 20 years or 30 years earlier, but this one, all immigrants, especially immigrants that were not from Northern Europe. And so it was very much race-based. Only certain types of white immigrants would be allowed in. I mean, they're very specific about that. So almost no immigrants from Africa or Asia. And part of the justification would be an American kind of social Darwinistic science called eugenics, which said that we, as a nation, must be fearful of race mixing. And therefore we must consciously try to protect the white race from race mixing. And that's eugenics. So we can't allow these others in. Eugenic societies appeared all over. And yes, I know that sounds very Nazi-ish, and yes, the Nazis have adopted eugenics. Yes.
Bretton Woods and the IMF on the bottom of page 8.
The bottom of page 8, Bretton Woods, IMF. Thank you for asking that. Where are we at? Yeah, bottom of page 8. That would be an international agreement at Bretton Woods to set up a stable financial system based upon the dollar. That would go from basically the end of World War II until 1971. A stable base where all major currencies would be based upon the US dollar. And that the dollar would be loosely based upon gold. And then to help new and developing countries, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, would be created with the idea being that they would provide low interest loans to developing former colonies, essentially. This would turn out to be a debt bomb down the road for new countries. But that was the idea of Bretton Woods.
What year did that end?
71. 71's when Richard Nixon, as president of the United States, totally went off the gold standard. Remember, Roosevelt did in 33. They kind of went back on it again after Bretton Woods, went off it totally to the system we have now. Yeah. Go ahead, John. Any other questions?
Nuremberg trials.
Nuremberg trials. Nuremberg trials on the bottom of page 8. Those are the war crimes trials that would be decided at Yalta. Now, of course, the victors would decide the war crimes, and they would punish and execute, heck, over 100 Japanese. But Nuremberg was a city in Germany where they punished the leading Nazis for what they called crimes against humanity. And it would be here at the Nuremberg trials, that the first time that someone would be tried and accused of a brand new term called genocide. So Nuremberg would be a real idea of the importance of that you will be held accountable for what you do, as long as you're on the losing side. Coming from, yeah. And that's on page 6.
Yes.
The Pullman strike, 1894. That would be a massive strike that started at the Pullman Railway Carriage Company within the American Railway Union under DEVS, the ARU. The American Railway Union joined the strike, and they shut down rail traffic all over the United States. But President Cleveland put mail on all the cars, and that allowed him to get a court order called an injunction, where then they could use force to stop the strike, and they brutally put it down. 6. And that would make Debs after this would be arrested, and that's when he would become the leader of the socialists. Debs. Coxey's army was the same year, 1894, and those were poor, desperate workers during the panic of 1893 who marched on Washington, D.C., hoping for government-created jobs, public works, we would call it in the 20th century. Infrastructure jobs, we say now. And thousands came from all over the United States, showing how desperate they were. And Cleveland was totally opposed, and Coxey would be arrested for walking on the grass. Essentially, they created a law that they were encamped on the grass. Now, having encampments for protests is as old as America. And they were arrested as political prisoners. And the thing about these two big things, they both happened in 1894 during the panic, and it looked like to many, maybe that revolution they all feared might be happening. And the populists said they had an answer. That revolution could, yeah.
Barbarossa,
Page 8, Barbarossa. All we need to know about that is that's the German attack on the Soviet Union, widening the war, and that would be, no one thought the Soviets could win, but the Soviets ended up defeating the Germans. 2 key battles, Moscow and then Stalingrad. The Soviet army would break the back of the German army.
what were those battles?
Stalingrad and Moscow. You get something about World War II, the bombing like that. You can mention Barbarossa and Stalingrad. That's a great bit of context. I mean, that's huge. That's one of those, like the person reading it's going to go, ooh, this person's smart. I like them. I want to give them a good grade. They do think that way. Yeah.
Antietam and the Emancipation.
So Antietam was page 5, 1862, the bloodiest day in American history, where Lee's army barely held on against McClellan's army, Union Army of the Potomac, and McClellan had a chance to destroy Lee right there and end the war. But it was enough of a victory to allow for Abraham Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. So Antietam led to emancipation. And emancipation said all slaves in areas controlled by the Confederacy will be free. January 1st, 1863. They will be free. In areas controlled by the Confederacy. Lincoln issued this as a wartime measure. It didn't free any slaves unless the Union won. Everyone got that? The Union had to win. But by issuing this, it ended slavery. Britain would never enter the war. The United States could recruit black soldiers, which would be decisive for the victory of the United States. So emancipation didn't, yeah, that's huge. Any others? Yeah. So after emancipation, they could start having, they were called colored regiments, and they got paid less, and some refused to take that money, but they would make, and black soldiers would make up 10% of the United States Army by the end of the war, and most of them were slaves who had fled and joined. And the 54th Massachusetts was the first of these so-called colored regiments to be allowed to fight in combat. And even though it would be, they would not win the battle they were in, they showed that they would be just as good as soldiers as anybody else. Very good soldiers. Yeah, decisive for the victory. And I should add one more thing about black soldiers. Sure, they fought to end slavery. They fought for the freedom of their family members. But the big thing is they fought because how could you deny them equal citizenship if they're willing to take a bullet for the United States? They're fighting for citizenship. Yeah.
Can you do presidential congressional reconstruction?
So presidential reconstruction, let's do presidential reconstruction first, and that's, yeah, it's right below emancipation, a few runs down. And that's 1864 till 1867. And it's basically what Andrew Jackson would incorporate after he became president. And he basically took Lincoln's wartime, did I say Andrew Jackson?
Yeah.
Andrew Johnson, Andrew Jackson was dead, and he saved the Union with nullification, but that's another story. Andrew Johnson, and that was Lincoln's wartime 10% plan. That said, if 10% of citizens in any Confederate state, 10% of men swore an oath of allegiance, they're back in the Union. And Johnson used this very lenient program to allow for former Confederates to basically be elected, again, called the Dixiecrat governments. And they passed a series of laws called Black Codes, which would greatly restrict the freedmen. And all these states had to do is 10% and ratify the 13th Amendment. And then Johnson would do everything he could, for personal reasons when it came right down to it, for part of it, to make sure that freedmen did not have rights and to try to stop Congress from giving people rights. And that would lead to eventually in 1867, congressional reconstruction. Sometimes you did see it called radical or Republican reconstruction, 1867 till 1877. And it would be personified by the Military Reconstruction Act of 1867 that divided up the Confederacy into military districts. And the states would not be allowed back into the Union until they ratified now the 14th and 15th Amendment, guaranteeing rights to freedmen. And the military would make sure that there would be elections and the growth of a Republican Party in the South and elected representatives who are going to be black. That's that Reconstruction government. But eventually Reconstruction, well, in Reconstruction. That is military. Oh, forgot one more thing. And in this, they would pass two different civil rights laws guaranteeing equal rights under the 14th Amendment.
Can you do carpetbaggers and Scalawags?
So carpetbaggers were the name given Southern Democrats called Northerners who came south, and a lot of they called them carpetbaggers. So there were Northerners who came south. Scalawags, they were what Southern Democrats called Southern Republicans. They were called Scalawags. Carpetbaggers were those who came from the north and went south. Did I say south and went north? I didn't say that, did I?
You did?
North who went south. We'll make sure I'm clear. Everyone got that? North who went south. And they were almost certainly Republicans. And most came down with the Freedmen's Bureau, but what carpetbaggers implied were a bunch of Northerners who came south to get rich off the destruction and the poverty in the South after the Civil War. So that was a way to discredit Republicans, especially to discredit blacks who were trying to get political freedom. Now, carpetbaggers is still pretty effective use. If you hear carpetbaggers today, it's somebody who goes from one state, usually wealthy, to another state to take advantage of the political system. Yeah. So Grant Credit Mobilier, that's on, it's on page 6. We are rolling. So that's near the top of page 6, quarter way down on the right. And Grant was elected president twice and did try to finish Reconstruction. But his administration would be known for scandal. And the most famous of these scandals would be the Credit Mobilier scandal. And the Credit Mobilier scandal was a scheme by the Union Pacific Railroad to create a company called the Credit Mobilier to build the Transcontinental Railroad and to steal money basically from the federal government as a scheme to build the Union Pacific Railroad. And they bribed everybody, members of Grant's cabinet, members of Congress, with stocks of this fake this company they created. And so this became a personification of not only Grant scandals, but of Gilded Age politics, of business using government to get rich. The Credit Mobilier scandal. Yeah, Grant probably had no idea. Yeah, there's some, he delegated. Yeah.
Political machines and Tammy Hall.
So political machines is on page 6 too?
Yeah, it's right below the box. Below.
Oh, it is right below. Good. So political machines, what these were mostly urban political parties would come to dominate big cities for the most part. And they were called political machines. And they would take advantage of the fact that cities were going so fast there were no services. So the parties would provide the services. You elect the Democrats in New York, and they will make sure that you have like a park and will pave your roads and have a police department. And the Tammany Hall was the most famous of these machines. That was the Democratic machine that ran New York City, arguably well into the 1920s. And you could say after, kind of, this Democratic machine. And the machines would be known. They would do a lot of things to build the city, but they were known for graft. Remember, graft is basically stealing from the government, like padding contracts to help your contractor friends. Yeah.
You do the ratification battle.
The rat battle. The middle of page 7. That's the battle over the Treaty of Versailles.
No, on
page
3.
That's even better. The ratification battle for the Constitution. Where are we at here? I can't find it.
Page 2.
Page 2. Oh. So the ratification battle, that was a battle between the Federalists who wanted a strong central government and they wanted the Constitution ratified. So they wanted that strong central government to avoid things like another Shays' Rebellion. And propaganda for the Federalists would be called the Federalist Papers, written mostly by Madison and Hamilton, but also John Jay. And the most famous is one we actually read in class, Federalist number 10, that said that this new Constitution will make sure there'll be no political parties and avoid democracy. So the Federalists said we got to have this strong central government to avoid the democracy. The Anti-Federalists, they were opposed to the Constitution because they feared the strong central government would take away power from the states and be anti-democratic. But their big thing was no Bill of Rights. No Bill of Rights. And that's the Anti-Federalists. Oh, I did them both, didn't I? Yeah. And when Madison, the main author of the Constitution, told his friend Jefferson, I'll agree to a Bill of Rights, Jefferson dropped his opposition, and that would help the Constitution get ratified. A series of very weird, contorted compromises that form our government to this day. Yeah. Republican womanhood is on page 2 also?
Yep, in the middle.
Oh, good. So Republican womanhood was this Republican idea that women, their role in a republic would not be to vote, but they would teach their sons how to be good citizens in a republic, and their daughters how to teach their sons to be good Republicans. And it's very similar to the cult of domesticity, isn't it? Remember the cult of domesticity, where the role of women is to teach their children how to become good citizens and moral citizens in society. So Republican womanhood, and so that was the way to look at that is that was kind of like a John Adams telling his wife Abigail Adams, "Oh, we haven't forgotten the women. Oh, sure you can't vote, but your job will be more important. You'll be teaching the men what to do." Yeah.
So I'm confused. Was Jefferson an anti-federalist or because he didn't want, or he wanted to be an
He did in typical Jeffersonian fashion and straddled the fence. So he was mostly an anti-federalist, but once he got the Bill of Rights, he dropped his opposition, but never came out and said he wanted. Now, there are other ones like, Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, completely opposed. You want to go through a few more? I told you I would go through a lot. It's kind of, I go through a lot on this. Yeah.
Henry Clay and the American system.
That was Henry Clay's nationalist program, Whig program of internal improvements, national bank, and a protective tariff. And this would be argued on for years. This is the Whig program, internal improvements, tariff, national bank. And so, yeah, whenever, this was the Whig laissez-faire program. If you got to go. I understand, yeah.
Thank you so much. This is great.
And I'll go through a few more minutes. If you have more questions. I told you we've gone through about 50 of them so far. Yeah.
Nixon to China on page 10.
Which one?
Nixon to China.
Oh, Nixon to China. So 1972, the rabid anti-communist Nixon actually went to the People's Republic of China and beginning the opening of relations with China. And this would be beneficial with ending the Vietnam War too. But Nixon understood, Nixon's pragmatic approach to this was that he could break up or take advantage of the split between the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union, who didn't like each other. And so let's pick one, and that would be our advantage in the Cold War. And that would begin the beginning of the steps to recognizing China in 1979. This would really help him in the election. Like Nixon, the rabid Cold Warrior, is making peace. Nixon, that's the one person out. That and most slaveholders. Yeah.
The Tet Offensive.
The Tet Offensive, 1968. And I was going to talk about that on Tuesday, but I'll tell you right. You want me to tell you right now? Doesn't hurt to hear. This was an offensive by the Viet Cong, against the South Vietnamese. Tet. And even though it was a South Vietnamese and U.S. victory, it turned public opinion in the United States against the war. It's on page 10, the Tet Offensive. Yeah, this is the turning point, and would lead to a president that it would lead to Lyndon Johnson dropping out of the election. For re-election. Kind of amazing. Lyndon Johnson, so after the exam, I will take a day and I will tell you Lyndon Johnson stories. And you will not believe that he was, you just would not believe the stuff he did. And there's a lot of stories I can't tell. We'll just leave it at that. Maybe this year, maybe when I retire, I'll mean, my last are I'll tell you these stories because I don't care. We'll be back next year. So,
You Guatemala
1954 Guatemala. The United States overthrew a democracy in Guatemala for the United Fruit Company. And we said, why? Because they're communist. And this is going to have major repercussions. The United States says for one thing, and do something else. Yeah, Guatemala and Iran's the worst. Overthrowing the democracy in Iran, which will literally be the first thing I talk about in class tomorrow. Literally be Iran tomorrow. Overthrowing the democracy in Iran. Yeah. Robber barons, page 6. Oh, I don't want to do page 5. I'm tired of page 5. Robber barons. Okay, near the bottom of page 5. And that's a name for the new entrepreneurs like Rockefeller and Carnegie and JP Morgan, who understood how to organize the capital, the money to build factories, like Rockefeller in oil or Carnegie in steel. They weren't like the old business leaders who, or the first starters of business who like understood oil. Carnegie knew nothing about steel. He just knew that's going to be the future. And they would be known for how ruthless they were in competition. Their ruthless measures in competition, destroying competition. Where from? Oh, the tennis party. Any others?
So Rockefeller was Standard Oil and Carnegie was West.
Carnegie steel. Then he'd sell it to JP Morgan, that would become US steel. Yeah.
Shays Rebellion.
Shays Rebellion at the bottom of page 2. I can't find it. Yeah, right. No, it's about halfway down. 1787. That was a rebellion in Western Pennsylvania, Western Massachusetts against. These were mostly Confederate veterans who were being strangled by debt and deflation, and they revolted against the government of Massachusetts.
You said Confederate?
Huh?
You said Confederate.
Did I say Confederate?
Yeah.
Where did I say Confederate?
I don't know.
Oh, Confederate. Yeah, the Confederacy. The Articles of Confederacy. Let me start over. This was during the Articles of Confederacy, sometimes called the Confederation. Maybe that's what popped out of my head. And this was a rebellion in Western Massachusetts against the Massachusetts government that was creating deflation and debt for farmers who could not pay this. And they revolted against having no political representation. And the US government had, the Articles of Confederation government had no way to put down an internal rebellion. And even though the rebellion was put down, Shays' rebellion would lead to this basic idea that we need a strong central government, AKA the Constitution, and there's too much democracy. So they would get rid of the Confederation and replace it with the strong central government. But this, we don't want democracy. Not we here, the people want the Constitution. Yeah. So Texas would win their independence in 1836 from Mexico. Where are we at here? Yeah, right under the period 5 in the middle, page 4. So they got their independence in 1836, partially led by Sam Houston. And that's when Mexico asked Americans to come in and they brought their slaves. The big reason they revolted was to keep their slaves. But this became a major political issue in the United States. Should the United States annex Texas? Because that could be many more slave states and upturn that entire balance, slave states and free states. This became a massive issue. But in 1845, oh, I'm sorry, 1844, it became an issue where John C. Calhoun would present Texas as, we must annex Texas as a slave state because that showed there was a positive good to slavery. That's where we began the positive good theory. And then in 1845, John Taylor signed the bill annexing Texas, taking advantage of the fact that the bill was signed for the next president Polk, because he was elected under a manifest destiny idea. But the whole idea about was the balance of slave states and free states. Any others? A couple more if you want. Yeah, cool. So innovation on page 5. The big thing about that one is that with the second industrial revolution in electricity and the internal combustion engine, this is going to trigger massive innovation in the United States. Innovation will breed more innovation, will breed more innovation. And part of this innovation will come about because the new corporations encourage risk taking. So companies would take risk in things they never would before because of corporations. Remember remember that's limited liability, spreading the risk out. So an example of that would be like the electric dynamo or new steel production, like the open hearth furnace. Or a good example would be all the inventions from Thomas Edison, like the light bulb and the phonograph and the motion picture camera. Or refrigeration. But innovation, and then that would encourage, you can just see it once you start going more innovation. Yeah. Bleeding Kansas, 5. I'll still answer it, but I'm sad I missed it. Bleeding Kansas. Yeah, it's near, right. About 3/4 of the way down on the left, page 4. Oh, on the right, I'm sorry. That would be the unofficial civil war that would begin after the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The Kansas-Nebraska Act allowed for popular sovereignty to fix slavery. And so you have the Jayhawkers, who would be the free soil, anti-slavery people, and they would be fighting the border ruffians, who were the pro-slavery people. And the border ruffians were brutal, known for their, the sack of Lawrence. But this would be the unofficial beginning of the Civil War. And John Brown would fight on the Jayhawker side and kind of give them a backbone and help lead to the victory of the Jayhawkers. Eventually, Kansas would become a free state. But basically, the Civil War began 1854, right after the Kansas-Nebraska. So, Compromise of 1850, and that was going to be Henry Clay's idea to get rid of all problems after the Mexican War, but solve all the problems, his last great compromise. And it didn't pass, but Stephen Douglas split it. Stephen Douglas split it into parts, and it did pass. For example, California free, New Mexico and Utah were popular sovereignty. There's other parts, but let's get to the biggest. The biggest part that passed and would infuriate Northerners was the Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act would force people in the North to help return people accused of being runaway slaves. So they had to join a posse. They had to do this or they would go to jail. And this infuriated Northerners, led to Northern states fighting back against this, helped lead to the growth of the brand new Republican Party. And then their reaction would freak out the South. How dare you not return our runaway slaves? So the Fugitive Slave Act would be one of these issues that would grow and grow and lead to the Republican Party, Bleeding Kansas, John Brown. The laws they passed in the North that infuriated the South were called personal liberty laws. I don't know if you remember that term, but personal liberty laws that basically Northern states said you don't have to follow the fugitive slave laws, and Southerners, just their head blew off. This is where the fire eaters said, start saying we have to have war. Yeah.
Horizontal and vertical truss on the bottom-ish of page 5.
I can't find it. I found it. Yeah. So these are different types of the new of these new combinations to control a bit. These new kind of combinations called trust to try to dominate a market. And the two main types of trust would be horizontal, and that would be like owning all the alike businesses. A good example would be like John Rockefeller owning all the oil refineries. So a horizontal trust is, when we think of monopoly, we think of a horizontal trust. Vertical trust is a company owning all the production from the the raw materials to the actual sale of it. Like Carnegie Steel controlling the iron mines and the railroads and the mills all the way up. So that's bottom to top. Those are the two different types of combinations who try to control a market. And it's because of these you start getting trust equal monopoly, which we still have it today, and it makes no sense anymore because those kind of trusts are gone because replaced with holding companies. Yeah.
The lost cause.
Lost cause, page 5. Lost cause, that is that view that the Confederacy was really fighting a noble cause for states' rights and against Northern aggression, and it wasn't about slavery. And that's the Confederate battle flag would become their symbol. And this is going to be taught in schools. So it basically implies that slavery wasn't that bad, and they weren't fighting about slavery. So this would say that Reconstruction was like a Northern invasion, which is exactly what, remember, Earl Faubus would say in Little Rock Central High. It's another Reconstruction, which is the governor of Arkansas, or Kansas. Anybody else have one? Are we good? You want one more? One more? Does anybody have one they desperately want to answer? Two more? I'll do two more and that's it. Then I'm done.
Okay, Coolidge, Hoover, and Mellon. On page 7.
So Coolidge, Hoover, and Mellon. And this is a good one you start going through and you can't remember. You know, these are the ones you don't necessarily have to fill, but you have to fill some. But it really helps going through these. So Coolidge, Hoover, and Mellon. So Coolidge and Hoover were the two Republican presidents elected in 1924 and 1928, and they would personify trickle-down economics. And both of them had the same Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon, who would personally write the two big tax cuts that would make up trickle-down economics of the 1920s. With the idea this will encourage more innovation and production by pumping more money in the hands of this wealthy elite who knows how to use it. So Mellon's the Secretary of the Treasury, and that's trickle-down. It's directly related to trickle-down economics. Last one, are we ready? Are you excited? Well, someone else had their hand. Last one.
Redeemer government.
Which one?
Redeemer government.
The Redeemer government, in the middle of page 5, right by lost cause. These were the governments. These were the growing Democratic Party in the South during and after Reconstruction, and they literally called it Redeemer as in redeeming white rule, and they would literally say redeeming white supremacy. And so these were the governments of the South that would be Democratic governments that would be the governments in power that would end Reconstruction and lead to the Jim Crow laws eventually and everything else. Well, good job. We went through a lot. Now, do you want me to do this again?
Yes.
You sure? So I will do it Monday at lunch if you want, and then Tuesday, I promise, I will go through everything in page 11. I'll just go. You come on Tuesday, I'll just go. Tuesday at lunch. Sound good? And I will do. I'm planning on. We'll see on Wednesday. All right. And like I said, I go through a lot. I hope that helped. And I know some of you didn't have anything written down, and I saw some of you had a lot of things written down. And I'm sorry I got a couple things. I got Yazoo in my head, you know, stuff happens.
What was Yazoo?
It's a different purchase that we don't need.
Yeah.
Oh.
There's.
Because I didn't recognize it.
I have to try to do it. All right, we'll see you guys. See you tomorrow.
What